When it comes to waging intergalactic wars, few franchises compared to Blizzard's Starcraft. Wildly popular and highly addictive, the real-time strategy game practically took over the world. Hi, I'm Brendan with the Leaderboard, and today we've got 107 facts about Starcraft. Hey, for instance, did you know that UC Berkeley offered a course in the art of competitive Starcraft? Yep, there's more of that coming your way. Let's get started. The first Starcraft game was released on Microsoft Windows on March 31st, 1998, and is largely regarded as one of the pivotal real-time strategy games. Early development began in 1995 when Blizzard felt it was at the top of its game. Work started shortly after Diablo went into development, and fresh on the heels of Warcraft 2, which was a huge hit. The concept for Starcraft was developed by designer James Finney and Chris Metzen, who worked at Blizzard but wasn't a programmer or designer. Metzen was a straight-up writer, which was highly unusual for the video game industry in the early 90s. There was no precedent, he says. At the time, there weren't many video games with big epic stories, but Metzen, who grew up a Marvel and D&D fanatic, yearned to give Starcraft an epic-scale story as soon as it was beginning production. Blizzard had been wanting to do a sci-fi, faraway universe-based real-time strategy game for some time. Even before Starcraft, Metzen was developing a discarded game called Bloodlines about, you guessed it, space vampires. Blizzard was perhaps a little overzealous about the success of Warcraft 2. The original idea behind Starcraft was to, quote, take Warcraft 2 and turn it into a space game, right down to the word craft. Blizzard even built Starcraft using the engine from Warcraft 2. The name similarity didn't escape the good people of Blizzard either. There was some serious debate and doubt about calling the game Starcraft. Even Metzen was skeptical. While in initial development, Blizzard saw Starcraft as an upping of the ante of Warcraft. It increased the number of playable races from 2 to 3, for example, with each race sporting a unique strategy and playing style. However, fans didn't react as expected. When Starcraft premiered at the E3 conference in 1996, fans thought the game was too much like Warcraft, derisively calling it orcs in space and Warcraft goes purple. At the start of E3, Blizzard dedicated 3 monitors to Starcraft and 3 to the newly unveiled Diablo. Fans were so underwhelmed that by the end of the convention, Starcraft had been shoved aside to just 1 monitor. This unexpected reaction led Blizzard to go back to the drawing board and do a major retooling of the game. Blizzard didn't forget about the orcs in space comment though. After a few clicks, Protoss hero Artanis says in order, "This is not Warcraft in space. It's so much more sophisticated. I know it's not 3D. Blizzard originally envisioned StarCraft as a game that would take only a year to develop. E3 knocked that thought out of their heads real hard, and Blizzard decided to take their sweet time. Blizzard's philosophy is that taking the extra time to make a good game is worth it in terms of reputation, sales, and satisfaction both within the company and from fans. Blizzard was so invested in StarCraft that they were determined to make it work even if the game's development was the longest and most painful one yet. Lead programmer Bob Fitch quickly realized that the Warcraft 2 engine wasn't capable of supporting the game's spell abilities, such as cloaking and burrowing, among many other problems. He offered to completely gut out the Warcraft 2 engine and redesign it in only 2 months, so that Blizzard could do everything they were thinking of and 10 times more. The StarCraft revamp actually set something of a precedent for all following Blizzard games. Now Blizzard president Mike Merheim says every game we do has to go through at least 1 major revision before it finally takes shape. As development continued, it became clear to the team that StarCraft had the potential to surpass Warcraft in terms of quality. Fitch became so invested that during crunch time, he started working 80-hour weeks and rarely leaving his office. The 3 species that define the game are the Protoss, the Zerg, and the humanoid Terran race. Metzen describes them as the high-tech, creepy, and psychic races, respectively. No race has an inherent advantage over the others. The dynamic between Jim Raynor and Sarah Kerrigan that went on to define the game started off as basically non-existent. It was something that Metzer found along the highway as the game was already in development. Naturally, the whole Queen of Blades ordeal came later as well. Metzen said he built the Zerg campaign around a Shakespeare meets Old Testament kind of vibe. He only came up with the Queen of Blades when he realized he needed a human-like character on the Zerg side as the campaign grew. Jim Raynor is based on a character in the 1991 film Rush, a cop not so coincidentally named, well, Jim Raynor. StarCraft's Jim is played by Robert Clotworthy, who also voiced the Fury car in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Sarah Kerrigan was named after Nancy Kerrigan, a famous figure skater who made headlines because her rival, Tanya Harding, hired her husband to break Kerrigan's leg. Competitor Game Command & Conquer had a character named Tanya. Get the joke? You guys are morbid. In StarCraft and StarCraft Blood War, Kerrigan is voiced by Glynis Tolkien Campbell, who is also known as Rogue in Diablo and Diablo 2. Aside from voicing Kerrigan, she also served as a storyboard artist for the original StarCraft. Terran units are constructed with the mindset of a greatest possible power at a least possible cost. Sounds like my kind of deal. Terrans are also best versed at the art of stealth. Terran battlecruisers can house crews between 4,000 to 7,000 people. Battlecruisers have the population of small cities, complete with the cantinas. Hey, now you can feel really bad when you shoot one of them down. You monster! Guy Montag is a fire bat, a Terran whose job it is to burn enemies. Not by coincidence, Guy Montag is a fireman in the classic Ray Bradbury novel Fahrenheit 451, whose job it is to burn books. The Protoss are way more technologically advanced than the Terrans or the Zerg, but the technology comes at a price. Their weapons are incredibly powerful, but also incredibly expensive, leaning players towards a quality over quantity strategy. When playing the Protoss in the original StarCraft, pylons are a requirement for creating and powering new buildings. Attempts to build without enough of them is met with a warning: you must construct additional pylons. The phrase has now become a widespread meme, so you know where that's from now. Unlike their archenemy Zerg, the Protoss suffer from a population shortage due to a period of civil war called the Aeon of Strife. They make up for their lack of numbers again by the quality of the individual soldiers, as well as robotic war machines and an impressive fleet of ships. Fenix, Zos, Vulture, and Goliath are all voiced by Bill Roper. He's definitely Blizzard's go-to guy and has a handful of roles in different Warcraft and Diablo games, including Diablo himself. The Zerg aren't particularly impressive in their technology department, but man are they powerful, as you would expect from any species described as self-made biological superpowers. The Zerg rely on overwhelming numbers and their units' cheap cost for their strategy. Their structures are actually specialized organs within the living, growing organism of a Zerg nest. The Zerg are led by the Overmind. The Overmind is an entity made of the collective sentience of the Zerg, and they're absolutely obedient to it. So you have thousands and thousands of creepy-looking aliens who are literally single-mindedly driven to dominate everyone else. Great! Unlike the Terrans and the Protoss, the Zerg are a hive made up of a number of different species, all of which were integrated into the swarm via infestation, which is exactly as terrifying as it sounds. When they spawn, larvae carry the DNA of every single available Zerg strain to the hive. They can then morph into any one of these types using DNA as a blueprint. However, larvae from young colonies have access to only a few basic strains, which is why you can't morph Ultralisks at the beginning of the game. Each segment of the larva's body has all the organs required to operate independently. This, combined with some impressive self-healing, allows them to morph normally even if split apart. Gaseer wasps, once inducted into the swarm, become drones, the basis of all rudimentary Zerg structures. Drones and larvae are both controlled by the overlords, who communicate with them through a type of instinctive telepathy. The overlord's main job is to keep the swarm coordinated during battle. Their ability to fly comes from an internal respiratory system that generates helium. The helium is stored in those creepy glowing pink pockets on their sides, which expand and contract to shift propulsion and altitude. Remember when we called the Zerg a biological superpower? Yeah. The Overmind, Templar, Zeratul, and Edmund Duke are all played by a single actor, Jack Ritchell. In a strange and unexpected twist of resume, he also played William Randolph Hearst in the Oscar-nominated film Chaplin. StarCraft led to the creation of the Blizzard Film Department, making Blizzard the first video game studio to take cinematics that seriously. Creating the film department was a huge risk. Cutscenes were often dismissed as useless filler, and creating the film department meant taking risks away from game design. The department didn't get greenlit until halfway through the game's development. Because of the slow development and high anticipation for StarCraft, fans started an online group called Operation Seawall Can't Wait Any Longer, in which they wrote fanfiction about waiting for the game and conspiracy theories about its development. But some Seawall operatives went so far as to stake out Blizzard's parking lot at night and take pictures of how many cars were there. For some reason, Blizzard wasn't bothered by this. In fact, they were flattered. To pay homage to the group, Blizzard included their name as a cheat code in order to produce units faster and thanked them in the manual. Operation Seawall weren't the only people excited for the game. StarCraft sold 3 million copies in just 3 months after its release. StarCraft was Blizzard's first worldwide hit. By 2007 and the unveiling of StarCraft 2, 9.5 million copies of StarCraft had been sold worldwide. Nearly half of those copies, 4.5 million units to be exact, were sold in South Korea. In fact, StarCraft was huge in South Korea and was even Blizzard's first esport. At one point, there were not one, not two, but 3 Korean cable channels that broadcast StarCraft 24/7. more on that in a second. Starcraft was the second game ever to use BattleNet, which was introduced in conjunction with the release of Diablo in 1997. In February 1998, a month before Starcraft's release, BattleNet had 1.5 million users. By the end of 1998, the service had 4 million users. Starcraft's first expansion pack was Insurrection, which was created by Aztec New Media with the blessing of Blizzard. The expansion added 3 single-player campaigns and over 100 multiplayer maps, but was deemed lackluster and displayed a significant drop in quality from the original. Another non-Blizzard expansion pack, Retribution, was released by Wizard Works Studio a little later in 1998, again with Blizzard's blessing, and again it was poorly received for containing nowhere near the quality of the original. Since neither pack was developed by Blizzard, they lacked the original voice actors from Starcraft and quality cutscenes. In 1998, a company by the name of Microstar Software used the Starcraft level editor to create a new product called Stellar Forces. Fans will make levels all the time, but the end-user license agreement forbids you to sell those levels. Stellar Forces added 50 levels to Starcraft, and it was sold for $19.99. Blizzard responded by filing a lawsuit against Microstar, which they of course won. Not only was Microstar forced to stop selling copies of Stellar Forces, but they forked over some cash to Blizzard, formally apologized, and destroyed all remaining copies of their expansion. And this was right after GT Interactive also won against Microstar in a very similar case. The real expansion pack developed by Blizzard, StarCraft Brood War, was released November 30th, 1998, only 8 months after StarCraft. Brood War added bigger campaigns and fixed imbalances. Bob Fitch described the expansion as the game that StarCraft should have been. I wish that StarCraft could have just been Brood War, but we didn't have enough time. In 1999, mission specialist Daniel T. Barry took his copy of StarCraft on the Space Shuttle Discovery for the first docking of the International Space Station, making StarCraft the first PC game in space. The game CD orbited the Earth 153 times and now resides in Blizzard's home office. 1999 also saw a StarCraft short story called Revelations make it into the highly reputed sci-fi magazine Amazing Stories. Man, it was even on the cover. The story was written by author Sam Moore and Chris Metzen himself. 10 years later in 2009, UC Berkeley offered a course in the art of competitive StarCraft. The course was run by a student, but you could still get credit for it. Reading material included Sun Tzu's The Art of War and Crazy as Me by famous Korean StarCraft pro Lim Yo Hwan. Actually, Hwan's fan club had over 587,000 members in 2006. Players began to enlist in the Pro StarCraft League in 2000. StarCraft was the country's most popular esport and only showed signs of slowing in 2008, which of course was right before StarCraft 2 revitalized the trend. Between 2000 and 2008, esports ballooned. The number of professional gamers increased 16.3% each year. More people attended the 2005 StarCraft Pro League final than the 2009 Super Bowl, like 50,000 more. There were 15 million esports fans in South Korea, making esports the second most watched sport in the country, second only to soccer. While the average esports pro made about $20,000, slightly higher salary than the average Korean citizen, on the eve of StarCraft 2, the big StarCraft pros could make more than $100,000 a year. StarCraft competitions in South Korea are sponsored by some of the country's biggest corporations, such as Samsung, Shihan Bank, Korea's second largest bank, and SK Telecom, Korea's biggest cell phone provider. The trend was so widespread that the Korean Air Force had a professional gaming corps until 2008. Since South Korea has a mandatory military service, the Korean Air Force created a StarCraft team so that pro esports players could perform their service and still play professionally during their peak years. Professional StarCraft players have had their heart rates clocked at over 160 beats per minute, which is the rate of a professional basketball player's heart rate during a game. As if that wasn't impressive enough, pro StarCraft players can record over 500 clicks per minute, while rapidly micromanaging resources and units, sometimes clicking over 8 times per second is just what you gotta do. With stats like that, you know there's a bizarre, tragic story out there somewhere. A South Korean man died at an internet cafe in 2005 from playing StarCraft. I mean, specifically, he died after a 50-hour marathon session during which he barely ate and didn't sleep properly. An official Nintendo 64 port of StarCraft was released on June 13th, 2000. The game was considered limited compared to its PC counterpart. It was announced in 2002 that work began on a third-person shooter based in the StarCraft universe called StarCraft Ghost. The game would have been released for GameCube, Xbox, and PlayStation 2, but was put on indefinite hiatus. In 2014, Morhaime was still claiming it wasn't technically cancelled, but if you Google StarCraft Ghost cancelled, you've got a really strong claim from Wikipedia. Despite suspending development of the game, Blizzard greenlit a book based on the console game titled StarCraft Ghost Nova. The novel followed the backstory of the would-be game's protagonist and was written by Keith R.A. DeCandido. Nova, the intended protagonist for StarCraft Ghost, didn't just stay on the literal and figurative page. She appeared appears in a Starcraft 2 Wings of Liberty mission and in Nova Covert Ops, an add-on to Legacy of the Void. Development for Starcraft 2 began in 2003. The game wouldn't come out until 2010. Early in development, Starcraft 2 was referred to under the codename Medusa. Interesting, because Sarah Kerrigan's infested form sure looks an awful lot like the mythical Great Gorgon. The development team for Starcraft 2 is comprised of over 80 developers, as well as hundreds of QA cinematics and other support personnel. Hundreds. Starcraft 2 takes place 4 years after the Brood War in game life. In real life, 12 years. While still developing the game, designer Rob Pardo said that Blizzard's goals for Starcraft 2 were to put more emphasis on resource management and to have less need for micromanagement of units, so that rushing, attacking early on in the game instead of focusing on building yourself up, was more viable. Pardo also said that the game was developed so that there would be more nuances that advanced players could discover, making a better distinction between beginner, good, and great players. One of these was a new high ground technique, where ground units can gain a height advantage and still remain concealed by the fog of war. Starcraft 2 developers wanted to make the economy in the game more expensive and complicated to manage. They were concerned that base building would otherwise be too simple in the game. Starcraft 2 was announced at the Blizzard Worldwide International in Seoul, South Korea on May 19, 2007. When Starcraft 2 went into beta, Blizzard enlisted the help of pro Starcraft players to test the game and help balance it. At BlizzCon 2009, Blizzard announced that they were working on a marketplace for player-made custom maps. This was later dropped in favor for the arcade mode, a more robust modding platform where players could turn their mods into sweet money, should they so choose. Along with some other perks, Blizzard gave away 2 beta keys for Starcraft 2 in a contest where fans were asked to design and draw a Blizzard-themed amusement park. The winner featured a Terran combat simulator. Keys for the Starcraft 2 beta, likely from BlizzCon 2008, inevitably ended up on eBay. Bids were around $300, with one chump asking for a buy-it-now price of $949. Starcraft 2 Wings of Liberty, the official sequel to the original Starcraft, was finally released worldwide on June 27, 2010. The sequel very predictably sold like hotcakes. Starcraft 2 sold over 3 million copies worldwide in the first month, making it the fastest-selling RTS game of all time. Starcraft 2 also snagged the record of the most data transferred from a single torrent. Just 3 months after its release, the most popular torrent of the game was downloaded 2.3 million times, a total of 15.77 petabytes, which is a number I literally cannot comprehend. Starcraft 2 implemented leagues, which helped match players against others with comparable skill. Beginners don't end up getting destroyed 5 seconds by pros. The top league is Grandmaster. We'll personally never know, but we hope that these players constantly make Grandmaster Flash references. Unlike the first game, Starcraft 2 doesn't support LAN play. That means that even if you're playing with people in the same room, your game's data needs to be routed through Blizzard's BattleNet servers. Designer David Kim simply said the decision to not include LAN support was part of the game's design philosophy, which is somehow not that satisfying. Other reports say they removed it over piracy concerns. In 2010, over 250,000 people signed a petition asking for Blizzard to include LAN support for Starcraft 2. Fans citing internet lag as a major cause of frustration with the gameplay. The 2010 Major League Gaming tournament in Dallas, Texas even experienced severe delays due to problems with BattleNet. Sarah Kerrigan changed voice actresses for Starcraft 2. She's now played by Tricia Helfer, who's perhaps best known as number 6 in Battlestar Galactica. Look closely and you can catch a quick glimpse of Optimus Prime in Starcraft 2. While not playable, a red and blue semi with the license plate Optim S1 can be seen in the Outlaws mission. The Terrans are raising Metroids! The glass tubes in some supply depots are housing gelatinous-looking characters that look suspiciously like the Metroid design in the SNES classic Super Metroid. As you could guess by the title, Heart of the Swarm is an expansion focusing on the Zerg. Heart of the Swarm was released on March 12, 2013, nearly 3 years after Starcraft 2. A far cry from the 8-month wait from Starcraft to Brood War. Heart of the Swarm was retroactively made a standalone game, not requiring players to own Starcraft 2. Although, you'd kind of be jumping in the middle of the story. For Heart of the Storm, the development team added AI build types that were heavily inspired by builds from pro Starcraft players. In the first mission on the planet Kaldir, look closely at the cliff. For Warcraft fans, the Lich King's armor is frozen on the side. Guess Blizzard isn't worried about people calling it Warcraft in space anymore. Starcraft 2 Legacy of the Void, the third chapter of Starcraft 2, was released over 2 years later on November 10th, 2015. The beta period for Legacy of the Void ran up until the week before the game's release, ending November 2nd. Even 17 years after the original Starcraft, fans certainly didn't lose their excitement. Legacy of the Void sold over 1 million copies worldwide in just its first 24 hours. Director Dustin Browder said that early on in development, development, the game was struggling with how to make missions feel like a Protoss mission that clearly state the race's incredible power. The Protoss aren't like the Zerg. In Heart of the Swarm, you could send Kerrigan on solo missions and revel in the bloodbath. But with the Protoss, the race is the powerhouse, not any one personality. The Marauder is a redesigned heavyweight firebat suit. It's specifically designed to pierce through hardened Zerg carapaces. The Cyclone was originally designed as an AI unit, but it was woefully underperforming. To increase efficiency and to encourage pure recklessness, it was designed to accommodate a human driver. The Overseers are the even more terrifying evolution of the Overlords, partially because they contain Terran DNA. An Overseer's creep glands can turn into sentient, unfertilized biomatter, which can become a changeling at the Overseer's command. In 2013, Kim Violet Dong Hwan became the first StarCraft II Pro to be offered a P1A visa by the US government, a document reserved for internationally recognized athletes. Choi Pult Sung Hun soon followed suit in 2014. It was heralded as a huge milestone for esports moving into the American mainstream. There's a StarCraft board game, not to be confused with the more accessible StarCraft edition of Risk. Sadly, the game's now out of print, but you can buy a new one on Amazon for a cool $500. In 2013, the original StarCraft earned the Guinness World Record for best-selling strategy video game for PC at over 11 million units sold. Gamers, if you haven't tried playing StarCraft, you now can for free. Blizzard released a patch 1.18, April 2017, that made both StarCraft and StarCraft Brood War free to play. Any Testosis fans out there? Blizzard officially announced in 2017 that the popular StarCraft casting duo, Nick Tasteless Plot and Dan Artostis Demkowski, would become a permanent part of StarCraft 2 as announcers, with the release of patch 3.14. Look forward to hearing them say GG after every game. Blizzard announced March 2017 that there would be a StarCraft remastered version. It would keep gameplay the same but have higher quality graphics along with 13 supported languages. If you love StarCraft's epic soundtrack, then head on over to Spotify and iTunes, where the soundtrack album has been available since 2007. Blizzard has hosted annual pumpkin carving contests since 2002. The lucky winners have won prizes ranging from plushies and figures to iPads and prize packages containing various merchandise. Carbot Animations on YouTube is well known in the StarCraft community for their StarCraft animated series. The series is popular for its bright and colorful art, humor, and lovable characters, and Blizzard is very much aware of the show's success. Blizzard liked Carbot Animations' work so much that the company had the two work together to release a StarCraft mod on StarCraft 2. The mod is available on the StarCraft 2 arcade. Simply go there, select the mod, and enjoy the game in all its cute, cartoony glory. Anyway, that's it for us. I'm Brendan, and thanks for watching 107 Facts About StarCraft. What race do you play in StarCraft? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to click the bell icon to become part of the notification squad, and if you like getting more from your games, subscribe to the Leaderboard, where we help you game smarter.